You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Monster House presents.
Monster Talk's a proud member of the Airwave Media Podcast Network, home of such shows as Kick-Ass News, Movie Therapy, and Therapist Uncensored. If you'd like to advertise on this show, contact sales at advertisecast.com. Oh, look here in the mailbag. I got a letter from a listener. Now, we don't usually read these on the air, but this one surprised me, so I'm going to go ahead and share. Listener Mike H. asks, Dear Monster Talk, what the fuck is up with Zimbabwe goblins? You know, honestly, I didn't know the answer to that question, but I put some effort in, and I think if you stick with us, by the end of this episode, you may join me in being slightly less ignorant about this topic. So let's head to Southern Africa and see if we can find ourselves some goblins.
It's actually quite unlike anything we've ever seen before.
A giant, hairy creature, part ape, part man.
In Loch Ness, a 24-mile-long bottomless lake in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a creature known as the Loch Ness Monster.
Monster Talk.
Welcome to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
So today we're going to be talking about a belief quite common in Southern Africa. I'm usually quite reluctant to cover topics about monsters outside of the English-speaking world, largely because I'm worried I'll have missed some important context that helps make sense of both the monster and the people who experience or believe in the monster. We all share a common humanity, but the varieties of culture are often unique to specific places and times, and thus an understanding of those environments are necessary to fully understand a concept or a practice. Also, I had to overcome one of the biggest hurdles to tackling a completely new topic, the inertia of ignorance. Even though ignorance might be a sort of delightful blank slate upon which one can stack piles of easily obtained information, I've come to be very cautious about stacking up such info because it might be nonsense, or even worse, it might be quite recent nonsense masquerading as well-aged fact. Those perils slow me down in my research, but I'm trying to be brave here, trying to be diligent in my research, and hopefully I'm not missing something huge. So, for me, it's really hard sometimes to try and go from a negligible amount of knowledge to the minimum amount of knowledge about a topic where I feel competent and comfortable talking on the record about something. But I've done my best here, and hopefully I haven't missed the mark. But if I have, we will come back with corrections. So for now, let's find out what the is up with those Zimbabwe goblins.
Monster Talk.
I need to stick in two quick but important corrections here. When we were recording this, I kept sticking an R into the name of one of the key characters in the story. His name is Kobus Jonker, not Corbus. And they called him Donker Jonker, which is Dutch for dark Jonker, because of his work with occult crimes. And the second correction is that when we recorded it, I was working off of documents from the mid-2000s, and further reading revealed that this occult police work was actually dating back from the early 1990s, which makes its close parallels to the USA's Satanic Panic not just similar, but literally overlapping. This period of time had many satanic ritual abuse, or SRA, stories going international with Canada, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, and, as will be obvious during this discussion, Southern Africa as well, having satanic ritual abuse cases.
Monster Talk.
Here we are, just the two of us again today. But I think this is going to be a really interesting topic that we're going to delve into. And I think you're going to have to tell the story because I didn't receive this email. You received a curious email recently about a topic that we haven't treated yet.
Yeah, it was just a real simple email, and we don't normally read these on the air, but it just said, Dear Monster Talk, what the is up with Zimbabwe goblins? And
That's a totally legit question.
And I was like, I don't know. What is up with Zimbabwe goblins? So I went and checked. And I was like, oh yeah.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah. Well, and I had forgotten. I had actually looked into this a long time ago, but I didn't look it up as Zimbabwe goblins. I was reading about the Tokoloshe, which is the local name.
That's right. Yeah, different name. I've heard several different pronunciations as well.
And spellings, and yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, so not sure where to begin, but what are we talking about, and where does the story come from? Because I believe it's not only Zimbabwe where these Tokoloshe or goblins are supposedly found.
This is a creature of folklore that exists in the Zulu, the Xhosa, and the Swazi folklores of that region. But especially since colonialism existed, South Africa, which is, several sort of those cultural regions all controlled now is one sort of political entity. It's a widely known creature there. It's a big part of it's not like Bigfoot, but it is as widely recognized as Bigfoot because these are little goblin-like creatures. They're often described as having big ears, being hairy, but usually invisible.
What a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, and they're widely known enough to show up in pop culture, like in commercials and stuff. So I found...
Yes, you sent me that commercial, and I was watching it and just reflecting too on how similar Australian English can be to South African English.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's that particular one is for, I think, castrol, I think oil is what it's actually for. But it's a strange. The commercial will make no sense if you don't know what a Tokoloshe is and the folklore around it, because it's basically two white guys and a black guy sitting around talking about a Tokoloshe and how dangerous they are. And the two white guys are trying to scare the, I'm air quoting here, superstitious black guy. And then the surprise is it cuts to the white guy's bedroom where his bed is lifted way up in the air on a bunch of castrol 5-gallon buckets of oil.
Therein lies the ad, yeah.
Right. There's the ad, but the joke is, they're making fun of him, but really they're the superstitious ones, which is, I guess, progressive. I don't know what the point is, but...
It's an old ad, too. Yeah, that wasn't a recent ad.
No, it is an old ad holding old ideas, but they're ideas that are still there, and that's actually part of what we're going to talk about today with this story.
Yeah, and what I think was so interesting is to see that was an older ad, and so you had this listener who contacted you about these goblins popping up in the media, and it's just interesting that it seems like they do have this kind of cycle, I guess, where they're in the media and then they, for us, I guess it's a different thing being here in the States, but it is this kind of constant thing that's been around for a long time. But I've been wondering, how do we get these kinds of stories here in the US or in Australia and Europe? Why are we hearing about these goblins?
Yeah, so there's basically two main channels for these goblin/Tokoloshe stories coming into the English-speaking world. One of them is more prevalent than the other, but I think they're both significant in how they frame the stories. So the first one is tabloid media. So it used to be that if you wanted international stories of monsters, the Weekly World News, which we've talked about before,
would provide.
Now, they absolutely made up a lot of their content, but they also stole content from other parts of the world, because if it was a UFO story from Brazil was much more exotic and exciting than a UFO story from Alabama, So, they went with it. It said World News on the cover. Here's a quick insert to clear up a little bit of a ramble from my first attempt to answer Karen's questions about tabloid coverage of Tokoloshe. While stories of magical beliefs in Africa do show up in the papers of Europe and the U.S., it's usually in the wildly overstated and inaccurate venue of tabloid newspapers. These are not journalistic entities concerned with sharing unbiased fact. They're attention and outrage engines designed to get you to feel things and to buy things. By far, the most egregious outlet for Tokoloshe stories is the newspaper The Daily Sun. This is a South African paper largely targeted at working-class black South Africans. Their online archive search only took me back to 2018, but in that time, they published 155 stories focused on the Tokoloshe and its hijinks. That's about 25 stories a year for the past 6 years. These stories are about sex, masturbation, physical assault, harassment, spiritual warfare, traditional medicine, and even the Tokoloshe effects on technology. The Daily Sun coverage has been criticized for reinforcing racial stereotypes of apartheid-era South Africa. The Daily Sun is owned by Naspers Ltd., chaired by a billionaire named Koos Becker. When these stories of the Tokoloshe do reach us here in the U.S. and in Europe, they're not usually given the proper context about the local beliefs. Even when the original context of the Daily Sun is intact, when it's happening right there in South Africa, it's sometimes difficult as an outsider to determine the point of some of these stories, other than that they're often salacious or have frightening details. But these tabloid stories are like shooting stars. They appear regularly, yet they're not on a schedule, and they make some light, but no larger impact. They all look alike. They're these tabloid newspapers, and they carry all these stories, and they tend to exaggerate the superstitious side. They exaggerate the sexually suggestive side. The
assault side,
yeah. The assault side. And if it makes the government look incompetent, or that they'll definitely, look, these poor ignorant people and how terrible they are at dealing with this clearly superstition and imaginary creature, right? It really is othering, and I can't think of anything positive to say about it, all right?
Isn't that silly, though? Because as you're saying, these tabloids are all about this kind of thing, and yet they downplay it when it happens in these other countries and other cultures, and yet they're purporting the exact same thing.
Well, exactly. There's the other right. The flip side is, look at those ignorant, superstitious people. They don't know about the real problem, which is lizard people in our pizza joints kidnapping our kids, right? That's
blind spots.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody believes weird stuff, but apparently that there's that low bar of, haha, look at those guys.
That mocking
it makes
element.
You feel better about your dumb ideas because you're mocking someone else's, So
hey, they're shadow people. They're not goblins.
Exactly. So that's one channel, but the other channel, which I think is maybe more troubling, and that's a bidirectional channel, and that is Christian evangelicals who are taking this folklore and repurposing it as deliverance, demonic content, like for only Jesus can protect you from these demons. They're not Tokoloshe, they're not goblins, they're really demonic, and they're called up by Satan, so basically rewriting the local folklore to make it even more sinister. Now, it's already sinister because these Tokoloshe goblins in the folklore, they don't come after you just because they're out roaming around and having fun. They're typically sent by some magic person as a curse on you. And there's a whole put together a magic bag of materials to summon the Tokoloshe. They'll bury it near your house. And now you've been cursed. And this stuff fits right into superstitious witch curse type folklore. It fits into sleep paralysis because people, wake up and they can't move and they feel like they're being oppressed by some living entity. So it totally fits into that. And so it's a ride, but by repurposing it with evangelical Christianity, it's getting a lot of replay back in the English speaking world, where missionaries talk about fighting demons and fighting these entities, and the story of fighting a demon in a village in Africa and trying to raise money for your missionary thing.
Oh, right.
That's a winner. Is what that is. Yeah,
it is. And you're totally making me think of people like Bob Larson.
Yes.
And his spiritual warfare, I guess, as he calls it, and how he travels the country. At one point, I think he had headquarters here in the Denver area. And so I've been to a number of his, what do you want to call them?
Performances.
Lectures. Performances, yeah. And, he does have a surprising amount of followers who are minorities, and I mean minorities here, not necessarily in the world. So people from maybe immigrants from Africa and immigrants from Mexico and places like that, who are really his manipulating them, I think, and acting as though he can save them from these cultural, creatures and the inherent fears that they have in the societies that they grew up in. And he's just really playing on that. And as you say, he certainly has that whole shtick down pat with, oh, I'm going to be going to this country to teach them about, removing demons and spiritual warfare and raising money for that. And it obviously lines his pockets.
Yeah. And I think that's a cookie cutter ministry template, if you will, that's been reproduced all over the place. And it's certainly prevalent down there in South Africa. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so now that we've said all of that, is there anything to these stories?
Well, it's a good question. Obviously, there's lots of news stories. I mean, there's like what do you call that? There's ink on paper about this, but it's usually, again, very sensationalized stories about like a police precinct being cleared out because of a Tokoloshe investigation or infestation.
And schools, I've seen all kinds of videos.
And there's videos of people like trying to catch one on camera, and
cleansings. Yeah,
it is. There's a lot of that, but I think the main thing is, just like and when I say this, I don't mean it lightly. These experiences are almost identical to the sorts of things that happen in poltergeist cases or ghost cases or jinn cases, where people start they glob everything together as a syndrome, like it's all every weird thing that happens becomes part of the experience.
Well, I'm really glad that you raised poltergeist, because that's exactly what I've seen in that the articles that I've read and the videos I've watched, they really do. Stories seem to align themselves to poltergeist claims, where you have some kind of malevolent ghost, a noisy ghost that is causing all kinds of problems in the community. There was one video that I saw of a gentleman in a community, and I think it was in Zimbabwe, and he was talking about how this goblin kept attacking his family and would appear when the family were eating and would throw hot ash into the children's food. Did you hear that one?
No, I was waiting to hear what happens next.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was continuing, and so it was destroying their food. And they had, I think, sought support from the local houses of worship and from priests who had come in and blessed the place, and yet this was continuing to happen. But a lot of the activity really sounded like poltergeist claims, and just people, things being thrown around, things going missing, and just that kind of poltergeist activity. So it really does seem to be a mishmash of claims and phenomena.
There's almost like a poltergeist syndrome that you don't even have to have like the explanation of poltergeist, but that same sort of cluster of things being thrown, things being broken, and then it sort of escalates where people feel like they're being attacked and they don't know what's happening. Like, you've lost that sense of there is an action that happened and clearly there had to be agency, and right. That's very disconcerting if you don't know what's going on. Now, if you have kids in the house, it's maybe less disconcerting because those crazy kids are up to it again. But if you lived alone, it would be really weird. There can be natural explanations for why weird things happen, and you have to have that sort of stop lumping it all into I'm being haunted and start trying to figure out what each incident might be. Because one of the things we see, one of the things we see over and over again is things that we can clearly say, look, that has to be a hoax. Someone's doing that to you. Being mixed in with things that happen to everybody, but now it takes on special significance. A clock falls off the wall. Well, sometimes nails fail. That happens. But if it happens in the middle of a poltergeist thing, that's just another part of the poltergeist thing. So you can't...
Part of the story,
yeah. Just lumping it all together is a dangerous habit of mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, another thing that you've got me thinking of is through looking at some of the videos on YouTube, there were some really disturbing stories of children being abused or being attacked by these goblins, and they were in the care of babysitters or caregivers at the time, who would then take them to hospital and say there'd been this goblin attack. And so it seems like it was a kind of cultural excuse for abuse.
Yeah. That there's a physical abuse and not that sexual abuse isn't physical abuse, but there's also sort of sexual assault component to these stories, and not in the core literature, but in the sort of the meta literature around this stuff. Anthropologically speaking, medically speaking, people have hypothesized that the Tokoloshe may be a way for people to seek help when they're being attacked by someone they know who otherwise, it would like bring down the law. And, it's complicated when a family member is assaulting you. But if you can deflect from that and just I'm being attacked by a Tokoloshe, look, here are my wounds, you might be able to get assistance and help and protection without incurring the wrath of the person who's doing the abusing,
So it's almost like a euphemistic thing, or a way of being able to culturally talk about taboo topics.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, like, it's hard to say the scale of that, but it's come up in enough of these articles about this from people who seem to be well educated about the topic that I think there may be something to that. But I mean, there's a lot of meta literature around this because it's really big in the southern regions of Africa. It's so you'll find
for a long time,
right? For a long time, and you'll find articles about how the media covers the topic, which not to whether it's true or not, but just literally just sort of like studying the ways that the stories are perceived and presented in the public eye. That's not likely to go away. So, I mean, it's a big part of the culture. It will always probably be a big part of the culture. So I think understanding that and not trying to other it because it's coming from Africa is maybe the best that we can do as English speakers to try to sort of get our heads wrapped around this idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just given that there are so many immigrants here from Africa who brought those beliefs here and, and shared them as well. But I'm just wondering, with you talking about this sexual assault and the supernatural, I'm wondering if, and you did kind of mention hagging as well. So what's the link there between this kind of thing and maybe sleep paralysis?
Some of these cases that people report are they sound exactly like sleep paralysis. Like they're in bed and they wake up and something's pressing on their chest. They can't breathe. They sense a presence in the room. They sense malice. And as someone who's suffered from sleep paralysis, and again, if this is the first time you've listened to the show or heard us talk about this, that's when there's sort of a disconnect between when your body is telling you to go to sleep and it prevents you from moving. But if that gets out of sync and you wake up, you may still be paralyzed. The paralysis keeps you from acting out your dreams, but sometimes people wake up out of sync and then they feel like they can't move because they can't. They're
hallucinating and they see shadow people or aliens or ghosts.
Hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations are very common with this. So that accounts for some of it, but obviously can't account for every story. And with anything that's got a complex syndrome and a cluster of symptoms or phenomenon, then you're gonna get a variety. That's not gonna explain it away. And speaking of explaining, there's a couple of things that I found interesting. The Tokoloshe is there's this story that maybe because if you live around a campfire, you sleep around a campfire, or maybe you're indoors and it's cold and you have a fire. Sometimes the circumstances happen, especially around heating furnaces, where it releases carbon monoxide, or there's too much CO2, or these sort of things can build up. And if you're sleeping on the ground, you might die. But if you're sleeping up, in a bunk bed or higher up, you might live.
On castor oil.
If you're castor oil 5-gallon buckets. But I don't know that that's actually a real thing that's ever happened. But it might be
interesting theory.
It's the kind of story that leads people who there's that idea of euhemerism, the idea that behind every legend there's a real true story, and maybe there were times when people gathered around a fire at night died and someone sleeping up higher didn't. And how do you explain that? So that's a great idea. But I think since goblins and little people and invisible agents appear in every culture, we don't need to explain it away with a CO2 or carbon monoxide story. So
well, I have another question.
Sure.
If you have a Tokoloshe, and since they just seem to be so common, and all these stories coming out all the time, sometimes maybe a spate of stories, and then it might go away for a little bit. But there's people are always appear to be talking about them. What do you do? How do you handle an attack like that?
Well, that's a great question. The general consensus seems to be that in order to fight this black magic, you need to go hire up some white magic. And I don't mean magic from white people. I mean good magicians, good folk magic to protect
Left-hand path.
Yeah. So, and that's going to be apotropaic magic. You're going to have something to help ward off the attacker generally. So you might get a charm or a spell or be told to do some task, that sort of thing. And then, obviously the other thing would be if you got like a house call and your magician came over, help track down where the Tokoloshe totem is that's calling them and dig that up and get rid of it and cleanse you in that way. So cleansing ceremonies, magical things to hold it away. I 100% guarantee that there are going to be Christian responses involving prayer and, that sort of thing, anointing.
Right.
Just basically that dominion gospel and the idea of, praying away and declaring dominion over Satan. That's another option.
Right.
Skepticism and critical thinking might be an option. It's not as sexy, but it's got some great long-term effectiveness.
I just think this isn't going to go away anytime soon. No.
It just like Bigfoot. I've come down after all this research. I don't think Bigfoot's a real creature, but I'm 1,000% sure it will not go away because it's become embraced culturally. It's just part of our culture. And I guess the other option would be, Karen, you could call in the occult-related crimes unit to come help you out.
What? So what's that about then? What happens when the government tries to get involved in these kinds of crimes?
Yeah. So, spoiler: this does not turn out to be the X-Files. It's no. This. Oh. And unfortunately, what happens is I think this started around 2014, something like that. It's a good 10 years ago. The government got involved and created the Occult-Related Crimes Unit, or the ORCU.
And where was this?
This is in South Africa.
South Africa. Okay.
And unfortunately, this did not lead to a decrease in superstition or, like a public awareness campaign helping people understand that Tokoloshes, while a wonderful part of our culture, are not real things that can hurt you. Anything like that. No, instead, they went full-blown satanic panic on this stuff.
Really?
I mean, it is so close to the experience of like police units looking for satanic crimes in the 80s. It is almost identical. They got a guy named Dr. Kobus Jonker, heck of a name.
That's a cartoon name.
He's got that Bob Larson vibe. I mean, seriously. And if you've ever watched any of those 1980s police training videos where you've got the tough guy cop who's going to help you out to take down Satan, we've let Satan run wild in this city for too long, and I'm getting too old for this. Beep, so it really. He tells a story of going in to investigate what sounds exactly like a poltergeist case. And while he's there, an old black man comes around and says that he doesn't like all this stuff going on. And so Kobus Jonker notes that the man is old and short and...
not a goblin.
He thinks he might have been a Tokoloshe.
In disguise,
after that guy leaves, the Tokoloshe haunting stops. Yeah.
There we go.
And so, case solved.
Well, this is strange. So you're saying this was back in 2014. So this is kind of post-apartheid.
Yes, absolutely.
That this happened. That's really recent. Do you think in any way it's been influenced by ghost hunting shows and paranormal TV in the States?
My gut feeling is based on the visuals that accompany the articles I've read about Kobus Jonker, that he's absolutely influenced by all the pop culture around the supernatural, and that would include all the ghost shows and the Come At Me Bros and the demons and everything. Yeah,
he's
absolutely
just taking it all on.
He looks like he's fully embracing the supernatural is real, and he's got that Malachi Martin vibe.
Right. I can see it.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, when you give authority figures sanction to engage with the supernatural, then that's another feedback loop, because now it makes people who believe in the supernatural further their belief that this is absolutely real. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a government response, you know.
Right. And so you said doctor.
One more quick insert. As I was researching this episode, I kept coming back to one particular question. What exactly is Kobus Jonker's academic credentials? I see him called doctor, and I see him called professor, and on some websites they vaguely mention he's got credentials as a sociologist, but never mention any specific institution or degree. So I've put some queries out there, including to Dr. Jonker himself, who I might add includes the honorific in his email address, so I hope that he or someone will explain and or clarify. But right now, I can't say much about his academic credentials, other than that his demonstrated expertise on this topic reminds me more of Ed and Lorraine Warren than of any actual academically credentialed researcher. On the one hand, one does not need a degree to conduct spiritual warfare. On the other hand, if you include the honorific doctor in everything, including your email address, you might ought to explain it somewhere. Like me, I explain all the time that yes, my nom de internet is Dr. Atlantis, but I'm not from any lost underwater city, and nor do I have a PhD. I disclose this all the time. But if I hear back from Dr. Jonker, I'll let you know.
Oh, well, this is, terribly interesting, and I'm just wondering where this is going to go. As we've established, it's just not going to go away, but I wonder how this is going to evolve.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess one of the problems is that some of the folklore and the reactions to it have sort of reinforced apartheid era stereotypes about the people of South Africa, and
very unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, and I feel like I have a better understanding of this now. It is an extraordinarily complex topic. It's tied in with all sorts of stereotypes and politics and religion. And even
medicine.
And it's just maddening that the majority of the world's exposure to this situation is through tabloid media, which just, it's we all are superstitious. Everybody's got weird beliefs. It's just the nature of being human.
We've talked about that a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
I really don't like the tabloids for 1,000 reasons, and this is just one more. So, yeah.
Racism.
I found lots of articles and links about this topic that are deeper than just tabloid media. So I'll put some of those in the show notes if you want to check them out. But I think maybe now, hopefully, our listeners are better informed about Zimbabwe goblins and how they're not just a joke.
Yeah. They're a really interesting phenomenon.
Absolutely. And there's so much more. So come back next week. We'll have something else to tell you.
You will.
Monster Talk.
You've been listening to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
You just heard a discussion about the Tokoloshe, or the goblin belief in southern Africa. I wanted to add one more detail about magic in South Africa. According to Wikipedia, there's two main branches to this type of magic. There is the diviner, or the Sangoma, and the herbalist, the Nyanga. These healers are effectively southern African shamans who are highly revered and respected in a society where illness is thought to be caused by witchcraft, pollution, contact with impure objects or occurrences, or through neglect of the ancestors. It's estimated that there are as many as 200,000 traditional healers in South Africa compared to 25,000 doctors trained in biomedical practice. Traditional healers are consulted by approximately 60% of the South African population, usually in conjunction with modern biomedical services. These data are from 1997 and 2007, so the numbers are unverified for today, but it's unlikely there's been any major cultural shift based on my reading. The Sangoma uses muti magic, and this can be a lot of different things, but it might be a packet or parcel containing herbs or bones or bits of animal or any other powerful magical component. Now, we briefly discussed apotropaics in the episode, which is the use of items that can ward off magical or supernatural harm. Common examples might be the use of holy symbols to ward off demonic influence, necklaces or charms to ward off the evil eye, or fresh garlic to ward off European vampires. It's using magic to fight magic, and it's a global practice. Fighting the irrational with the irrational seems to be pretty rational to our species. And I guess the premise of this show is that you can also fight the irrational with the rational. But we have a much longer history with the former. Around the world, people report monsters. But are they real? Join the detective of the impossible, Joe Nickell, as he walks you through investigations to reveal often surprising natural explanations behind some of the most famous cryptids and legendary animals ever reported. Using scientific skepticism, meticulous fieldwork, and historical deep dives, Joe Nickell seeks out hidden clues and real-world candidates that sometimes reveal that even the most unlikely monster stories may have a basis in reality. The Science of Monsters is the first book from Monster House LLC, the publisher of science shows Monster Talk and In Research Of. The revised edition is now on sale and includes corrections and suggestions from you, our listeners, and now readers. Sales of The Science of Monsters directly benefits Monster House and its podcasts, thanks to the generosity of its author. Pick up the revised Science of Monsters today at Amazon.com, available in paperback and Kindle editions. Monster Talk theme music is by Peach Stealing Monkeys. We hope you enjoyed our show today, and if you heard anything this time worth sharing, be sure and mention where you heard it.
This has been a Monster House presentation.